Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. I'm Dad, this is my den. And today, rather than reviewing something, I'm going to do a little opinion piece. Hard-hitting, controversial. Well, probably not. Today I want to talk about this sort of modern trend in entertainment towards the epic rather than sort of the episodic. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about giant long story arcs. I'm talking about stories with massive stakes, the destruction of the earth, the destruction of the universe, the destruction of the multiverse. And what I'm also talking about is a lot of shows that, frankly, don't seem to have done that well with audiences, and have some real problems. Um, I think that you could probably, historically put this back initially to Star Wars. When Star Wars came out, and here I'm talking about the original trilogy, sequels to movies was certainly not unknown. James Bond obviously had, a lot of sequels to that original James Bond film. Jaws had sequels. But what those sequels generally didn't do was continue a story. It was a character that was continuing, situations that were continuing, but not a story. And so between Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, you got this overarching story. Some episodic qualities to it, and especially in the first film, because George Lucas didn't know if he was going to get to make any other films. But it sort of created this idea for a trilogy of films with a continuing storyline. And I think this became even more heightened in the 90s with the release of The Lord of the Rings, with the release of Harry Potter. The idea was pretty hot. Lost is a good example from TV, but also a good example of something that seemed like it didn't quite stick the landing. The X-Files, very episodic, but it seemed to be telling a deeper story about aliens and the government cover-up. Twin Peaks, episodic, but it was telling this longer story. But again, the problem seems to be that very often these epic stories that they're trying to tell are failing to connect with the kind of audience that Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings got. So why? I think it's because epics are hard to write. I mean, first of all, you can't pump out an epic in a very short period of time. You need a bit of a framework. It takes a lot of time to plot it out, to develop the characters. It's a difficult thing to write. Tolkien, I think, was like 17 years writing The Lord of the Rings. He didn't write it over the course of 2 or 3 months so that they could rush it to production. But that's very often what is being asked of writers these days. And the streaming services have only heightened this. So there is a desire for these story arcs and for these longer tales, but they're not giving writers enough time to actually write them. And there's also the aspect of not every writer has an epic in them. It takes a special kind of person to do that. I mean, it's more difficult to write a novel than a short story. A series of novels is something else entirely, and some people have the knack. And some people just simply do not have the knack. There also seems to me to be a problem with the way they try to write these. It's very often being done with story groups or by committee. And it seems like epics are generally being told properly by a single person. They have a particular story they want to tell, and it's a story that requires a certain amount of depth, a certain amount of scale, a certain amount of character development. It can't be told in a short story. It can't be told just in a single novel. It requires more than that. We're not talking about, again, just an episodic, Lord of the Rings is set in Middle Earth, but it's not just different stories that are set in the same place. It's this long narrative. It needs to come from a single person. They have to have the desire to tell a story. It's not something you can say, hey, we need a quick epic. I know, grab those 3 people over there, they could do it. Or, we'll grab 10 people and each of them can write 1 episode. And there we go. With just a little bit of direction from a showrunner. It's not how you produce an epic. It's not fair to the writers who are being asked to do something that is just not done that way. And yet, the demand for this kind of entertainment does exist. Even when fans oftentimes come away from these things not real thrilled with them or let down a little bit with the ending, there's that desire for that kind of epic entertainment. So what do we do about it? Again, I think the answer is pretty simple. Number 1, adapt an existing epic and do it faithfully. Obviously, you're going to make certain changes from book to film. It's going to happen. But you need to keep the spirit of that narrative intact. This is not the time to come in, tinker with it, and subvert it, and add all sorts of brilliant new ideas. It needs to hang together. It needs to retain that narrative. It needs to retain its characters so it will work and it will have the emotional impact that the audience wants. You can't just play games with it. There are so many you could do. And the proof is right there. Game of Thrones. Incredibly popular. But where did it start to run into problems? When the story ran out and the television writers had to try to finish it. Very difficult for them to do, but also they interjected things into it that didn't really need to be there. And it kind of petered out at the end. But then some years later, we get House of the Dragon. Again, very popular, and it seems like it's doing a pretty good job of sticking to the story that was written. These epic plots are difficult to develop. Don't screw around with them. And the characters are integral to the plots. Don't screw around with them. And if you stick to it and make it a very faithful, or at least a fairly faithful adaptation, you got your epic. We just get recently this Dungeons and Dragons movie. It got some good reviews. It kind of bombed at the box office. But I can't stop thinking, why are you making some movie just kind of conjured out of nothing when you could adapt the Dragonlance novels? When you could, adapt some of the Forgotten Realm novels. Heck, even, the Gord books from Gygax or the Greyhawk setting. They exist. It gives your television writers a framework to work off of, to adapt, so they don't have to try to invent some big, complicated plot all themselves. Dragonlance would, I almost guarantee you, done properly, Dragonlance could become the next big franchise. But instead, you just kind of make something up and stick some D&D stuff in it, and doesn't really make sense to me. If you want a new Star Wars trilogy, and I mean, I'm not the first person to say this, but you got that whole extended universe. Tons of novels that you could work on. The narrative's there. The characters are developed. What are you doing? And this is coming from somebody who never read the novels. But I know they exist. I know people who read them and loved them. What are you messing around with trying to just summon up a trilogy out of nothing when you have this material to work with? All you have to do is be relatively faithful to it, and there's your hit. It'll be solid. It'll be structurally sound. And now you can put your focus into making it look pretty and having charismatic actors deliver those parts. What are you doing, Hollywood? You owe it to your writers to give them the time and the resources they need to produce worthy entertainment. And there are many that are doing that all the time. It's not like everything out there is bad. There's so much good material out there. But I guarantee that good material probably has writers who are given the time to do what they need to do. They're the right writers for the job. They're not being asked to do things they don't understand or work in things they don't understand. They're being done the right way. You can get epic entertainment. You just need to do it the right way. Stop setting writers up to fail and stop half-assing the process. And you'll get where you want to be. And that's my opinion. Hey, if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. That really helps me out. If you enjoy the videos I produce, please subscribe. That helps me out even more. Until the next time, I hope you have an awesome day. Be kind to one another, and I will see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.